Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I'd really appreciate your comment. It helps me understand if you enjoyed the story and how I can improve in future ones. I came home after a long day with a stiff neck and a slow headache, set my bag on the chair, and walked straight to the bedroom to change. I'm Daniel Pierce, 38, a product operations lead in Austin. I wanted a shower, quiet air, and my wife's legs brushing mine under clean sheets. The bedroom lights were low. A stapled packet sat centered on the bedspread. She was upright, hands folded on her knees. I felt steady, factual, and surprised enough to pay attention. The room was in careful order, blinds half closed, our dog asleep near the dresser, the air unit humming. She told me to sit on the bench at the foot of the bed and said she had standards she wanted to implement. Her tone was even. No raised voice, but every word carried planning. The packet was placed between us, and the first page showed a title in bold type and a date stamped in the corner. The cover read, Relationship Agreement, 21 Rules. The layout looked prepared in advance. Numbered sections, bold non-negotiables, and a separate section labeled Consequence Tiers. There was a signature block for me and a smaller acknowledgement line with her initials already written. The formatting signaled an expectation: read, agree, sign. I started at the top of page 1. Rule 1 stated that I could not meet my friends without her prior consent and a written plan for return time. Rule 2 set a complete ban on alcohol, including work events and family gatherings. Rule 3 required weekly written emotional check-ins each Sunday night, to be signed by both and saved in a shared folder. Rule 4 required prior approval for any travel, including day trips to see my father. I stopped. I didn't read any further. I asked where this document came from. She said her best friend, Mariah, had introduced the same system at home and said it saved everything. The phrasing matched what I had heard from them at brunch last month. Back then it sounded like theory. Now it was printed and waiting on our bed. She added that couples who drift need structure and that this was a proven approach. She used terms I do not hear from her in daily life: emotional safety plan, containment of avoidance, repair windows. The wording was careful and consistent, and not in her usual style. I understood that these terms were adopted from someone else's materials. The origin mattered because borrowed language often hides borrowed assumptions. I noted the difference and let the silence sit. She pointed at a paragraph in the middle of page 2 labeled Consequence Tiers and explained that each infraction would trigger a specific response. Then she tapped a small box and said I could initial there to confirm I understood. She maintained a calm office tone. The expectation was clear: confirm, then comply. I looked for balance. The rules were written for me. There was a clause at the end of the non-negotiables, granting her the ability to amend the document as healing progresses. There was no mirrored clause for me. I asked whether adjustments applied to both of us. She said adjustments were needed for me because I avoid hard work at home by being easygoing. I logged the statement and the imbalance. She asked for my signature before dinner so she could sleep safe. I was still wearing my work clothes and had not showered. I said I would read the document later, after I rested. My voice was even. I placed the packet on the nightstand and aligned it with the edge. She mentioned that Mariah's husband had signed quickly once he understood the benefits. I remembered how he had looked the last time we saw them: quiet, thinner, and tired around the eyes. I kept my face neutral and asked whether she and Mariah had discussed any outcome data or time limits. She said results were obvious and that support from friends would keep us accountable. I washed my face. The water cleared the headache, but not the questions. I returned to the bedroom and scanned the remaining headings without reading the text. I saw personal device protocols, check-in attendance requirements, and household compliance notes. I closed the packet and slid it under my watch on the nightstand so I would not forget it. I told her I would give a response after I reviewed it fully. My tone stayed calm. The day had been long, and I was not going to make a decision while running on fumes. She said a clear answer tonight would show commitment. I said a clear answer tomorrow would show judgment. I kept my posture open and my words short. No raised voice. I told her I would read the first page again in the morning and consider whether any policy in our home should apply to both people or to neither. She looked disappointed but said nothing more. I set my phone to do not disturb, folded my pants over the chair, and lay down on top of the covers to let my body settle. The packet stayed on the nightstand within reach, but not in my hands. That was the line for the night. Morning brought a firm schedule. She stood at the bedroom doorway while I buttoned a clean shirt and said she needed my signature before dinner. The packet sat on the nightstand where I left it. I told her I would read it at lunch and after work. I kept my voice steady. She kept hers steady. The difference was intent. I was setting time to think. She walked me through the first page again without asking if I wanted a recap. She pointed to the consequence tiers box and slid a pen across the bench at the foot of the bed. She said I could at least initial that I understood the structure while I read the rest. I placed the pen on the nightstand. I said I would sign nothing until I finished reviewing. She pressed for a reason. I gave two: scope and fairness. She moves through the house like a manager auditing an employee, testing for pushback. Initial here that you understand consequence tiers. I asked two questions only. What's the measurable goal? What happens if the rules aren't mutual? She did not answer the first question. She said outcomes would be felt, not measured. When I repeated the word measurable, she said I was being rigid. On the second question, she said mutuality would confuse the process because I was the one who needed course correction. I asked what standard she would accept for herself if the roles were reversed. She said that comparison was not helpful. I recorded the answer. At the kitchen counter, I poured coffee and opened my calendar. She stood beside me and read from a note on her phone. She announced that my Friday meetup with two friends was suspended pending her consent. She stated that any alcohol in the house would be discarded tonight. She said Sunday night would begin our first written check-in. I asked if she was implementing rules before they were signed. She said some steps could begin now because the need was obvious. I said no steps would begin until we had agreement on scope and reciprocity. She said I was avoiding connection. I said I was maintaining process. My phone buzzed on the drive to work. A group text lit up the screen. Mariah wrote that standards create safety. Another friend wrote that a strong partner accepts structure. At my desk, I printed a copy of the packet and used a pen to mark the parts that concerned me. I circled the clause that allowed her to amend the document as healing progresses. I drew a line beside the missing clause that would allow me the same. I underlined the pre-approval language for travel and noted that it applied to me only. I wrote a question mark next to the line about device protocols, which I had not read in detail yet. I kept brief notes, scope, and timeline. She called at 11:40 a.m. and asked if I had signed the understanding box. I said no. I repeated my two questions. She repeated the same answers. She added that couples who try to negotiate every detail lose momentum and miss their chance to reset. I said we were not negotiating every detail. We were identifying the baseline that any agreement needs to stand. She asked if I wanted to save our marriage. I said I did not accept the idea that refusing unilateral rules equals indifference. She paused, said we were stuck because I would not show trust, and ended the call. At lunch I read page 2 closely. The consequence tiers listed verbal warnings, loss of privileges, and mandatory sessions with a coach she followed online. The tiers escalated with repeated non-compliance. There was no section describing the end of the system if it failed to improve anything. The afternoon brought a second call. She suggested a trial period where the rules would apply to me only for 30 days and then be reviewed. I asked who would review. She said she and Mariah would help me track progress. I asked again for a measurable goal. She offered an overall sense of safety. I asked how we would know if safety improved. She said I would notice fewer conflicts if I followed directions. She raised her voice half a step and asked why I always had to be so analytical. I said analysis prevents resentment. She hung up. A new text arrived from her at 3:17 p.m. She sent a photo of the packet with a sticky note. Please initial here so I know you're committed to growth. I replied with one line. I will respond after I finish reviewing the content. No extra words. 10 minutes later she texted. This is exhausting. In the parking lot, I called my brother and described the situation without adjectives. He asked what I wanted. I said I wanted a marriage built on agreements we both live by. He said to write that down and keep repeating it. He said to avoid debating side points. He said if I kept it simple, I would hear the real answer. I thanked him and drove. Back home, the bedroom was arranged the same way, but the packet now had 3 sticky tabs marking the signature lines. She said she would cook while I signed. I said I would shower first. Under the water, I reviewed the day's exchanges. She had set a deadline. She had attempted partial implementation. She had pulled in a friend network. She had proposed a one-sided trial. On each step, I had kept 2 questions in front of us and refused to move off them. After the shower, I set my laptop on the dresser and opened a blank document. I wrote the 2 questions at the top and left space for her answers. I wrote a third line. Is any rule invalid unless applied to both? I saved the file and emailed it to her with the subject line clarity questions. I stepped back into the hall and told her I sent 3 lines that needed specific answers before I would proceed. She said I was turning our home into an office. She put plates on the table and repeated that she needed a signature tonight so she could relax. I said I would not sign. She asked if I was threatening separation. I said I was not threatening anything. I was refusing to agree to a document that treated me as a subject while excusing her from the same standards. After dinner, she brought the pen to the bedroom again and pointed to the understanding box. I said the same sentence I had said all day. I will not sign until there is mutuality and a measurable goal. She asked what measurable looks like. I said any objective indicator we both accept in advance, such as a reduction in documented conflicts or a set number of successful weekly check-ins with both parties submitting the same form. She said that sounded cold. I said it sounded clear. She tried once more. She said I could show good faith by pouring out the beer in the fridge and canceling Friday. I said I would not perform symbolic acts to prove loyalty. I would consider any shared standard we both live by. I repeated the 3 lines I sent by email. She said she would sleep in the guest room if I would not sign. I said she could choose where she slept. I would not sign. I placed the packet back on the nightstand and set an alarm. I told her I would send a written response tomorrow that addressed structure and reciprocity. She said I was dragging this out. I said I was moving at the pace required to avoid mistakes. She closed the guest room door. I turned off the light and looked at the ceiling for a minute to clear my head. I did not rehearse arguments. I said a short plan in 1 sentence. Hold the 2 questions and require specific answers. Then I slept. I woke before the alarm and opened my laptop at the dresser. I wrote the response I had promised. The first line was the title, centered and clear, Rule 0. The sentence under it was short and complete. If it isn't mutual, it's void. No qualifiers. I read it twice to confirm there was no room to sidestep it, then moved to the rest. I mirrored her format on purpose. Same headings. Same signature blocks. I kept the scope narrow so nothing hid in long paragraphs. I rewrote the 4 rules I had reached last night and applied each to both of us. If I needed consent to meet friends, so did she. If alcohol was banned for me, it was banned for her. If weekly written check-ins were required, both of us completed them on the same template and stored them in a shared folder. If travel required approval, the veto power belonged to both. I added 1 line to each mirrored rule that settled enforcement. Either both live under the rule or neither does. I added an integrity clause because outside coaching had already entered our home through vocabulary and group messages. The clause required disclosure of advisors, materials, and schedules. No private guidance shaping one person's behavior while the other believed a discussion was between 2 spouses. I named it plainly, outside input disclosure. I set a rule that any advice used in a decision had to be summarized and attached to the check-in that week. If one of us wanted privacy around a personal topic, we noted that privacy and kept it out of policy. I wrote an accountability section that did not look like punishment. I defined a review window of 4 weeks. During that time, both of us would log compliance, conflicts, and outcomes. I set measurable goals. A reduction in documented conflicts compared to the previous month, on-time completion of the weekly check-ins by both parties, and adherence to any shared decision rules. I added an exit criterion in simple language. If the metrics did not improve after the window, the entire system ended without extensions. No indefinite trials. The end of the window brought a decision. Keep, revise together, or drop. I wrote a single paragraph on money. It was not dramatic. It stated that until we had a mutual agreement, discretionary spending would move to personal accounts and joint discretionary items would pause. Mortgages, utilities, and essentials stayed in place. Gifts and extras would resume only after we had shared standards. I wrote a communication rule for the period before a decision. It limited group involvement. No mass texts about our progress. If either of us wanted to share something with a friend, it had to be factual and brief. The goal was to keep the issue in the home while we worked on it. If we decided to involve a counselor in the future, both of us had to agree first, and the counselor's role would be documented in writing. I wrote a short block on privacy and devices. No unilateral access to phones, accounts, or logs. If a device rule ever became necessary, it would be drafted as a specific one-time measure with both signatures and a clear end date. There would be no routine surveillance of either person. I wrote a timed ultimatum at the end. She had 72 hours to choose between two options. Option 1. Sign the mirror draft with Rule 0 on top and start the 4-week window. Option 2. Withdraw the original packet and return to normal boundaries with no rule system in place. If no choice was made by the deadline, I would treat that silence as option 2. I set the exact deadline day and time to avoid confusion. I kept my tone consistent across the document. I did not describe feelings. The rules stood on their own. They were clear, limited, and testable. I exported the file as a PDF, printed one copy for the nightstand, and emailed it to her with the subject line, Rule 0 plus mutual draft plus 72 hours. In the body, I wrote 3 lines. I am willing to try a structure we both live by. I am not willing to live under rules written for one person. Choose by the deadline at the end of the document. She read it on her phone in the kitchen while coffee brewed. She asked why I had copied her format. I said structures work best when people can compare like to like. She asked why I had included the finance note. I said generosity requires respect and clear terms. She said I was punishing her. I said nothing in the document punished anyone. It restored symmetry. She asked if I had told anyone. I said I had outlined the situation to my brother without details. She asked if I planned to send the new draft to Mariah. I said no. If she wanted to share it, the disclosure clause covered that. She said disclosure felt invasive. I said it was a record of inputs, not a request to surrender private thoughts. She asked why the end of the window required a decision. I said systems should not run without results. If nothing improves, keeping a system is the same as admitting it exists for control. She asked how I would handle a missed Sunday check-in if we chose option 1. I said both of us would reschedule inside 48 hours and log the reason. If either of us missed 2 in a row, the window would end early. She said that was strict. I said it was simple. She asked why the deadline was fixed. I said fixed deadlines prevent drift. She asked what would happen if she needed more time. I said she could always ask, but I would not extend without a specific reason that both of us accepted. She asked what I would do if she chose option 2. I said I would continue with normal boundaries, move discretionary spending as written, and schedule a meeting next week to talk about how we want to handle social plans, travel, and weekends without any paperwork. I kept myself to those answers and did not add warnings. I changed my shirt for work, placed the printed copy on the nightstand under the lamp, and left the pen beside it. I completed my tasks, ate lunch at my desk, and answered ordinary calls. Mid-afternoon, she texted to say she had read the draft twice. She asked if I would consider dropping the integrity clause. I said no. She asked if I would allow a one-time exception on alcohol for an upcoming party. I said any exception had to apply to both of us. After work, I stopped for groceries and chose simple items for dinner. At home, I cooked, set plates, and asked about her day. When we cleared the table, she said she would take a walk. I said I would straighten up the kitchen. After she returned, she stood at the bedroom doorway and asked if I was serious about the deadline. I said yes. She asked if I was prepared to end the rule system entirely. I said I already had. The only system I was willing to run was the one on the nightstand. Anything else was already over. I set an alarm on my phone labeled with the deadline time. I placed my wallet and keys in the bowl by the door, put the receipt from groceries in the folder with the other household papers, and kept the evening routine steady. I was done debating. If she wanted structure, she had it. If she wanted control, it was not available here. The first response arrived before 9. You're turning love into paperwork. No question. No answer to the draft. I read it once and put the phone face down. At noon, she tried a different angle. Delete the finance line and I'll sign the rest. I replied with one sentence. Mutuality is not for sale. 20 minutes later, a selfie from the bathroom mirror, a short dress, a caption about missing closeness and wanting a reset without forms. I sent the same 3 lines from the email body. I am willing to try structure we both live by. I will not live under rules for one person. Choose by the deadline. Then came blame. If your job were bigger, you would not resist leadership at home. I left the message unanswered. I closed my laptop and finished my meeting notes. At 2:38 p.m. my phone showed an unfamiliar number. I stepped into a conference room and answered. Daniel? It's Nate. I kept my tone neutral. What's up? I signed with a divorce attorney this morning. I thought you should know. Why? Because the contract turned every day into a review. I tried for months. I followed the rules. I stopped seeing friends without permission. I stopped drinking. I wrote those Sunday logs. It did not fix anything. It replaced normal talk with accusations. Did you ask for mutual changes? Yes. She said symmetry would slow her growth. Last week she moved to device checks. I woke up to a note on my phone that said unlock now. I'm done. He sounded finished. Are you okay? Yes. I'm staying at my brother's for a while. I only called to say this is not a solution. If you are standing your ground, keep standing it. The call ended. I wrote the time and a 2-line summary in my notes. At 5 I drove home. The packet was still on the nightstand. The pen had been moved to the center. She stood by the dresser and asked if I would decide tonight. I pointed to the clock on my phone and repeated the deadline. I told her I had spoken with Nate. Do you know he filed today? Her mouth tightened. He didn't tell me. He asked me to know. I know. They have problems that are not ours. Understood. My decision still rests on mutuality. She started pacing and listed her concerns again. Fear of conflict, the need for guardrails, proof of care through compliance. I let her finish. I asked one question. Will you sign Rule 0? Silence. Then a partial offer. Temporary one-way rules for 30 days. After that we can talk. No. She texted Mariah in the hallway. 20 minutes later her screen lit up with a long message. I saw the preview only. It referenced staying firm and not rewarding resistance. No mention of Nate. I went to the kitchen, cooked simple food, and ate at the counter. At 8:11 p.m., she forwarded a paragraph from a coach's newsletter about strong containers. I replied with a single sentence. Ask the coach to confirm in writing that unilateral rules are recommended for married couples. No reply for an hour. Then, he won't email that. It's context you don't get. I requested clarity, not context. She put her phone away. At 9:50 p.m., she walked into the bedroom, holding 2 beers from the fridge. She set them on the dresser and opened the trash bag in the corner. I'm throwing these out to show I'm serious. I picked them up and placed them back in the door shelf. Do not make decisions for both of us without agreement. You're making this impossible. No. I set one rule. Mutual or void. The group thread went quiet around 10. The earlier stream of encouragement ended without a sign-off. I guess someone had confirmed the news about Nate. I did not ask. I brushed my teeth, arranged tomorrow's clothes on the chair, and set my alarm. Morning brought a message from an unknown email address with a copy of a petition attached. Nate again. No comments. Just the document. I archived it. At 9:17 a.m. my wife sent a text. I feel ambushed. You are not ambushed. You are invited to sign a fair agreement. You don't care how scared I feel. I care. I will not accept one-sided terms. Around noon, she called from her car. I spoke with the coach. He says mutual rules are not appropriate in early phases. Ask him to send that to me. He won't. Then it does not affect my decision. She ended the call. At 3:06 p.m., Nate texted again. Filed. Case number attached. I told Mariah because she kept saying I was bluffing. Received. She may contact you. Be clear or don't engage. I'm not asking you to take sides. Understood. When I came home that evening, the packet was gone from the nightstand. It sat on the kitchen table, open to the signature page. 3 sticky notes requested initials. I moved it back to the bedroom and placed it under the lamp. I printed a second copy of my draft and clipped it in front. I sent a new email with the subject line, 24 hours remaining. The body contained the same 3 lines. Her mother called after dinner. She said she was worried and asked what was happening. I gave one sentence. We have a document issue, and I require mutual rules. Her mother asked if I could be flexible. I am flexible about many things, not about unequal standards. She said she would talk to her daughter. At 10:14 p.m., my wife knocked on the bedroom door and sat on the bench. Will you agree to one change? Remove the disclosure clause. No. Why? Because outside voices are already in our home. If they will not stand behind their advice, it does not belong in our process. That feels controlling. It is a simple request for transparency. She left the room without another word. By the second morning, no signatures had appeared. I followed my regular schedule. I replied to work messages, sent a few invoices, and replaced the printer ink I forgot earlier in the week. At 1:22 p.m., a text arrived. I can agree to mutual alcohol rules and mutual check-ins. I need control of friend meetings and travel for now. No. Why can you not compromise at all? I can. Not on equality. At 4:35 p.m., the coach finally wrote to her. It was a short note forwarded to me. I do not engage in written contracts with clients' spouses. Please use your own judgment. I thanked her for forwarding it. I did not comment on the content. The deadline fell that evening. I set the phone on the dresser and watched the minute change. No new messages. I walked to the kitchen, rinsed a pan, and put the dog out. I returned to the bedroom, picked up both packets, and placed them in a folder labeled with today's date. I sent one final message to her phone and to email. Deadline reached. The unilateral contract is void here. If you want a mutual structure, my draft remains available. If not, we continue with normal boundaries. 10 minutes later, she came into the room. She looked at the empty nightstand. So that's it. That is it for unilateral rules. We can still choose a mutual plan. She sat down and stared at the floor. She opened her phone, scrolled through the group thread, and put it down again. Nate really filed? Yes. She nodded once. She whispered a single word I could barely hear. Okay. I left her with the folder on the dresser and went to take out the trash. The deadline held. The deadline passed without a signature. I sent the final message and closed the folder. The next morning, she came to the bedroom doorway and asked what happened now. I said the one-sided contract was finished here. I told her my draft remained available if she wanted a shared plan. She nodded and said she needed to think. I said I would not reopen the deadline for the old packet. That part of the discussion was closed. At noon, she texted that she had read Nate's filing and that Mariah had confirmed it. She added that the group chat had paused. I replied with one line. We would run our home without outside direction. She asked if I would accept a simple set of shared practices rather than a full set of mirrored clauses. I said I would, as long as Rule 0 sat at the top. She agreed to talk that evening. I printed a one-page document and left it under the lamp. Title at the top, date under it, and 5 short items. Shared calendar for social plans and travel. Both of us had entries. No approvals. If a conflict appears, the person who added later moves or negotiates. Alcohol, no ban. Each person manages intake. If either of us raises a concern, we pause alcohol for both for 2 weeks while we address the concern. Check-ins. One scheduled 30-minute meeting on the first Sunday of each month with the same 6 prompts for both of us. No signatures. Notes optional. Outside input. If advice from a friend, coach, or article influences a request, the source is named when the request is made. No enforcement by third parties. Amendments. Any change must be written on this page and signed by both. If a proposal is not bilateral, it expires on arrival. I did not add consequence tiers. The page fit under the stapler without bending. When she came home, I read each line aloud and pushed the sheet toward her. She moved item 2 above item 1. She changed the check-in day to the second Sunday because of her work cycle. She asked for a note that either of us could invite a counselor at any time, but the other person had to agree before sessions began. I accepted those edits. She signed. I signed. She apologized for pushing the earlier packet. She said she had wanted control because she felt anxious and wanted proof that I would not ignore problems. I said I would listen to concerns and act when needed, but I would not live under unilateral orders. We put the sign page in the kitchen drawer with the insurance documents. I moved discretionary spending to separate cards as I had already planned. I kept the joint account for mortgage, utilities, groceries, and savings. I showed her the spreadsheets. She said she understood. I told her I would meet my friends on Friday as scheduled and that I would add the plan to the calendar as a courtesy. She said she would be at a coworker's birthday. We both entered our plans and checked in times. No approvals were requested or granted. She sent a final message to the group chat that night. She would not be using the 21 rule format and would be leaving the thread for a while. No one replied. She blocked notifications from the coach's newsletter. She deleted the old packet from our cloud folder. I did not ask her to do any of that. On Sunday, we tested the new check-in. We sat at the table at noon with coffee and the 6 prompts printed on a single sheet. We answered in turn. The prompts were simple. What went well, what did not. One practical change for the week. any scheduling issues, any concerns about money, and one appreciation. No scoring. No lectures. 15 minutes each. When time ended, we stopped. It felt like a normal exchange. That was enough. I kept my boundary in place around future proposals. I said any new rule would be measured against the first line on the page. If it required one person to obey while the other was exempt, it would not enter our home. I told her I would not debate it again. If a day came when unilateral terms returned, we would discuss a separation plan. She said she did not want another conflict like the last week. We called Nate together that evening. I told him we had adopted a small shared plan and that there were no enforcement ladders. He said he was moving ahead with his case and that he wished us well. In the days that followed, I kept life steady. I met my friends on Friday and returned when I said I would. I limited alcohol to 2 drinks without anyone tracking it. She went to the birthday and came back in a disposition that did not invite argument. We added a small trip to the calendar to visit my father next month. She added a work retreat. We checked for conflicts. There were none. I updated my emergency contacts and asked her to update hers. I confirmed the will documents and verified logins for essential accounts. These were ordinary tasks I had delayed for too long. I did them without commentary. A week later, she brought up the old document once, then stopped herself. She said it was no longer relevant. I agreed. I told her I would not keep a copy in the house. I had already shredded it. Only the 1-page agreement remained. She asked if I felt different. I said I felt clear. She said she felt less tense. Neither of us tried to assign credit. I kept the principle in front of us without repeating it constantly. If a decision came up, we checked the page. If the topic did not fit the page, we used ordinary judgment. The absence of penalties removed noise. The simple calendar entries reduced friction. Our marriage did not need speeches. It needed a standard and actions that matched it. I lived by the same lines I asked her to live by. When she reached for my hand on the couch, I did not treat it as a negotiation. I acknowledged it as a normal gesture. When she asked about dinner plans, I gave a direct answer. When I wanted time alone at the gym, I wrote it on the calendar and went. The 21 rule packet is gone. Her friend's model collapsed in public. I did not use either as leverage. I used them as information. The only rule that remained was the first one. If a request respects both people, I am open. If it does not, I decline. Respect is not a bargaining chip. It is the condition for any agreement. I kept my place and refused to sell it. That is enough.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.